The red bow on the Mercedes sparkled beneath my son's Christmas lights, but it wasn't for me. Daniel placed the keys in another woman's hand, while I clutched a mason jar with 5 wrinkled bills. They thought age had softened me. They mistook grief for weakness. But when I opened her forgotten purse, I didn't find lipstick or letters. I found surveillance of my home, forged papers with my name, and proof that betrayal lived inside my own family. That night, I stopped being their victim. Because survival isn't about silence. It's about knowing when to fight back. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The Mercedes wore a red bow. It sat in my driveway like a threat wrapped in silk. Christmas lights blinked across the hood. Daniel pressed the key fob into her hand. Not mine. Hers. Vivian's hand. My son beamed like he'd been knighted. Brooke clapped and squealed. They circled the car like it was a monument. I stood at my kitchen window. A mason jar sat cold in my palm. Inside 5 crumpled dollar bills. 3 buttons. A receipt from 1987. Daniel had handed it to me an hour before. He called it symbolic. Said I'd always been thrifty. Said this was a tribute to my values. I thanked him the way mothers do. Smile first. Swallow later. The public library had taught me that. 40 years at the circulation desk. You learn to keep your face pleasant. You learn to swallow disappointment like aspirin. The engine purred to life outside. Vivian slid into the driver's seat. Her coat was cashmere. Her perfume smelled like citrus and money. She'd appeared 8 months ago. Right after Frank died. Flawless hair. Designer everything. A voice like warm honey over steel. Within weeks, she was Mom Viv. I became just Nora. The Mercedes rolled down my driveway. No invitation for me. Just the hum of an expensive engine. And the ache in my knees from cooking their feast. 3 hours of prep work. Turkey. Stuffing. Frank's mother's pie recipe. They'd eaten fast. Barely tasted it. I turned back to the counter. A black leather purse sat beside my recipe box. Vivian's purse. She'd left it behind. I told myself I was being responsible. A good neighbor. I carried it to my bedroom. Set it on Frank's side of the bed. The sheets still smelled like his aftershave. Even after 8 months. The purse was heavy. Expensive leather. Gold clasp. I opened it the way I'd shelved books for 40 years. Methodical. Careful. Inventory first. A fat wallet. 8 credit cards. A rhinestone-cased phone. Folded printouts. The bank statements showed numbers I couldn't count on 2 hands. Notifications flashed across her phone. Deposits. Meetings. Appointments. Then I found the photos. My utility room. My desk drawers. My jewelry box. Not snapshots. Surveillance. The kind a stranger takes when she wants to own your life later. My hands didn't shake. Librarians don't shake. We catalog. We preserve. We remember. I kept scrolling. More photos. My hallway. Frank's office. The lockbox under our bed. Documents I'd never signed. An appraisal of my house dated October. A valuation I never requested. The appraisal listed Daniel as my power of attorney. I'd never given him power of attorney. My throat tightened. The phone buzzed in my hand. 20 missed calls. All from someone named Aaron. Texts scrolled upward. Mom, please. Mom, call me back. Mom, I'm worried. A son. Vivian had a son. The irony tasted bitter. She was stealing mine while ignoring hers. I set the phone down. Restored everything exactly as I'd found it. But first, I took photos of my own. Every document, every statement, every surveillance shot. The house clock struck 7. They'd been gone 2 hours. Headlights swept across my window. The Mercedes returned. I watched from the kitchen. Vivian stepped out slowly. Her eyes scanned my porch. My cameras. My locks. She hadn't forgotten her purse. She'd left a test. I met her at the door. Handed the purse over. She thanked me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her fingers moved fast, checking contents like a pianist checks keys. "Everything's here," she said. "You're so thoughtful, Nora." Then she touched Daniel's arm. Called him a thoughtful boy. The word boy hung in the air. Like a leash. I mentioned the phone call. A state trooper had called earlier. Asked about a missing person named Vivian Lau. Her face flickered, just for a second. Then the story came. Smooth. Practiced. Things were complicated with Aaron. Boundaries were difficult. He didn't understand her need for space. Brooke looked genuinely shocked. "You have a son?" Vivian's smile tightened. "We're working through some things. Family can be exhausting." Daniel nodded like he understood. Like we were all in this together. They left 20 minutes later. The Mercedes hummed away into the December night. I sat at my computer. The one Frank bought me in 2019. Found Aaron Lau in 15 minutes. Consumer protection attorney. Specializing in elder fraud. Photos with his mother at charity events. Posts about safeguarding seniors. A whole practice built on protecting people like me. His office was in Boston. His bio mentioned a law degree from Georgetown. Awards for advocacy work. Either the world is a tight circle. Or I was standing in the center of a con. I poured myself tea. Frank's mug. Still chipped where he'd dropped it in 2003. The mason jar sat on the counter. Mocking me. $5. 3 buttons. A receipt from a hardware store. Daniel thought this was tribute. Thought I'd smile and frame it. But I knew what it was. It was the price tag he'd put on me. Before he sold me to someone else. I opened my notebook. The one I'd used for 40 years of patron records. Blue cover. Spiral bound. Half the pages already filled with Frank's doctor appointments. Started a new page. Wrote the date December 23rd. Wrote Vivian's full name. Wrote Aaron's office number. Then I wrote down every single thing I'd seen in that purse. Account numbers. Document dates. Photo timestamps. A librarian's first rule: document everything. A widow's first rule: trust nothing. Frank used to say I had a mind like a steel trap. That I never forgot a face or a fact. Tonight, I'd need both. The Christmas lights blinked outside. Red and green against the snow. The neighborhood looked peaceful, like a postcard. Inside, I laid out my evidence like index cards. Sorted by date. Cross-referenced. Cataloged. The pattern was clear. Vivian had been mapping our lives since Frank's funeral. Every vulnerable moment. Every financial detail. She'd been patient. Strategic. Professional. This wasn't her first time. The red bow was still on that car somewhere. Probably parked in Vivian's driveway now. $60,000 of bribe wrapped in German engineering. But the real gift had been left on my counter. A purse. Full of proof. I turned off the kitchen light. Sat in the dark with Frank's mug. The tea had gone cold. I drank it anyway. Tomorrow, I'd call Margaret. My attorney. My friend for 32 years. Tomorrow, I'd start building the case. Tonight, I'd just hold this mug. And remember what Frank taught me. Some stories don't end when you think they do. Some stories are just beginning. The mason jar caught the streetlight. $5 glinted inside. I picked it up, set it on the mantel next to Frank's photo. Not as a keepsake, as evidence. People tell you your worth if you listen. Daniel had told me mine. Now I'd show him what a 69-year-old librarian is actually worth. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Morning came cold and sharp. December 24th, the day before Christmas. I made coffee at 6. Frank's old percolator. The sound filled the kitchen like company. My phone rang at 6:43. A state trooper. His voice was formal, professional. He asked about Vivian Lau. Said she'd been reported missing by her son. I told him she'd left in the Mercedes yesterday. With my son and daughter-in-law. Around 4:30, he asked if she seemed distressed. No, I said. She seemed perfectly comfortable. The trooper thanked me. Said he'd follow up if needed. The line went dead. I sat at the kitchen table. Vivian's phone number glowed in my notebook. The purse had been returned. But I'd kept what mattered. Screenshots. Evidence. Proof. I opened my laptop. Searched Aaron Lau again. His firm's website listed office hours. 9 to 5. Boston address. Reviews praised his dedication, his integrity, his relentless advocacy for vulnerable seniors. The universe has a sense of humor. Dark. Precise. I dialed his office at 9:02. A woman answered. Professional. Warm. She said Aaron was in meetings all morning. Could she take a message? I introduced myself as a friend of Vivian's. From Virginia. A widow concerned about her well-being. The warmth in her voice shifted. Became careful. She said Aaron called his mother every single day. Had planned to fly out for Christmas. But Vivian insisted on staying with friends this year. Friends. The word sat in my chest like a stone. I thanked her. Said I'd try again later. Hung up before she could ask more questions. Vivian was wealthy, loved, mobile, a son who called daily. Resources most people dream of. So why a $60,000 car from my desperate son? Why surveillance photos of my house? Why a story about being alone? The coffee had gone cold. I poured it out. Made a fresh cup. My phone buzzed. Daniel. He wanted to come over. Needed to talk. Said it was important. I told him to come at 10. They arrived at 10:15. Daniel wore a blazer. Brooke wore heels. Like they were heading to a performance review. Or a funeral. They sat on my couch. The one Frank and I bought in 1989. Daniel's jaw was tight. Brooke's hands twisted in her lap. Vivian felt violated, Daniel said. You went through her purse. I corrected him. I safeguarded her purse. And called when the police were looking for her. Brooke's voice was thin. She thinks you were snooping. I asked about the car. About Daniel's promotion at work. The one he'd mentioned at Thanksgiving. His eyes slid away. Landed on the carpet. Things are fine, he said. Work is good. The promotion is coming through. Brooke nodded too quickly. I asked what the car cost. Daniel stood up. Said that wasn't my concern. Said Vivian was generous. Said they were building a relationship. I asked if he had power of attorney over my estate. The room went silent. Color drained from his face. Brooke looked genuinely confused. What are you talking about? I told them about the appraisal. The documents. The photos. Daniel said he knew nothing about that. Said Vivian must have been helping. Estate planning for my future. I asked who requested the appraisal. He didn't answer. They left 10 minutes later. Brooke's heels clicked across my porch. The sound felt like punctuation. I watched them drive away. Their car was 8 years old. Dented bumper, rust along the wheel wells. Not the car of people building wealth. The car of people drowning. I opened my laptop again. Public records. Employment history. Court filings. Daniel's promotion didn't exist. 2 write-ups in his file. One from September. One from November. Financial records took longer. But I'd learned patience at the library. A second mortgage. $70,000. Filed in late September. The same month Vivian's photos of my house began. My property appraisal was dated October 15th. The request listed Daniel Hayes as power of attorney. The notary was real, licensed in Virginia since 2008. But the signature wasn't mine. The Y in Nora curved wrong. Too sharp. Too confident. I'd signed my name 10,000 times. On library cards, loan documents, Frank's hospital papers. I knew my own handwriting. This wasn't it. I grabbed my coat, my purse, my notebook, drove to Margaret's office. She'd been my attorney for 32 years. Filed our wills, handled Frank's estate, knew every detail of my life. Her office smelled like lemon polish and old law books. She hugged me at the door. Asked about Christmas plans. I told her I needed to check something. In my files. We sat at her desk. She pulled up my records. No power of attorney. Nothing filed since Frank died. I showed her the appraisal document. The forged signature. Her face went pale, then hard. She said we should call the police immediately. File a report. Start criminal proceedings. I told her not yet. First, I wanted the whole web. Every thread. Every connection. So when it snapped, there'd be no pretending it was a misunderstanding. Margaret leaned back in her chair. Studied me like I was evidence. Then she nodded. Said she'd draft a new will. Ironclad. Everything to charity. We'd file it today. Notarize it properly. Make it bulletproof. I signed my name. The real one. The Y curved gentle. Familiar. Margaret witnessed it. Her paralegal notarized it. The document went into the safe. Copies went into 3 separate files. It felt like changing the locks on my own heart. I drove home through Christmas traffic. Shoppers carried bags. Lights blinked on storefronts. Carols played from outdoor speakers. The world looked festive, warm, safe. But I'd learned something in 8 months of widowhood. The world isn't what it looks like. It's what it does when you're not watching. Back home, I made tea. Sat at my kitchen table. Spread out everything I knew. Timeline, photos, documents, phone numbers. Vivian had been mapping us since Frank's funeral. Patient, methodical, professional. She'd found Daniel's weak spot. Financial desperation. Fear of failure. She'd found mine too. Loneliness. The need to believe my son still valued me. The mason jar sat on the mantel. $5 caught the afternoon light. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It said Vivian would love to meet for coffee. Tomorrow. Neutral territory. The number wasn't Daniel's or Brooke's. It was Vivian's. I stared at the screen. At the careful politeness. The manufactured warmth. She wanted to talk. To smooth things over. To regain control. I texted back. Said I'd love to. Asked where and when. The response came fast. A cafe downtown. 10 in the morning. I set the phone down. Tomorrow was Christmas. Most places would be closed. But desperation doesn't take holidays. I opened my phone's voice recorder app. Tested it. Played it back. Clear audio. Good quality. Frank had bought me this phone 2 years ago. Said I needed to keep up with technology. He was right. Just not for the reasons he thought. I practiced tapping record without looking. Smooth. Natural. Invisible. A librarian learns to love paper trails. A widow learns to love duplicates. I made dinner. Soup from yesterday's turkey. Frank's recipe. Ate alone at the table. Our table. The chair across from me stayed empty. Outside, Christmas lights blinked. Red, green, white. Inside, I laid out tomorrow's clothes. My blue sweater. Frank's ring on my finger. My purse. With the recorder ready. Some people think older women are easy targets. Soft. Trusting. Confused. They forget we've been filing. Organizing. Documenting. For decades. Vivian had made one mistake. She'd left her purse in a librarian's house. And librarians never forget to return what they borrow. But sometimes we keep the receipts. I turned off the lights. Climbed the stairs. Frank's side of the bed was cold. But my mind was sharp. Clear. Ready. Tomorrow, I'd meet Vivian. Tomorrow, the real documentation would begin. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Christmas morning arrived without ceremony. No stockings. No carols. Just coffee and cold sunlight through the kitchen window. The cafe opened at 10. Even on Christmas. For people with nowhere else to go. I dressed carefully. Blue sweater. Pearl earrings. Frank's wedding ring on my right hand. My purse held the essentials. Wallet. Keys. Phone with the recorder tested and ready. The drive took 12 minutes. Streets were empty. Most families were home. Opening presents. Making breakfast. I parked near the cafe entrance. Checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Looked like a grandmother. Harmless. Soft. Perfect. Vivian was already inside. Seated by the window. Wearing cream-colored cashmere and concern. She stood when she saw me. Smiled like we were old friends. Her hug smelled like expensive perfume. Her grip was firm. Controlling. We sat. A waitress brought menus. I ordered tea. Vivian ordered nothing. She spoke first. Said she was worried about me. About Daniel. About our family dynamic. Her tone was warm. Maternal. Completely manufactured. She said Daniel had mentioned my finances. That I seemed stressed. Uncertain about the future. I widened my eyes slightly. Let my hands tremble around the teacup. She leaned forward. Said my house was beautiful. A wonderful asset. But assets should work harder. The word harder hung in the air like bait. She suggested I consider selling to an investment group. Then leasing it back from them. Tax advantaged, she said. Liquid capital. Financial freedom. And Daniel could help manage everything. Make sure I was protected. Cared for. Her smile was perfect. Practiced. Predatory. I asked what kind of investment group. She waved her hand. Said she had connections. People who specialized in helping seniors. Maximizing their remaining years. Remaining years. The phrase landed like a diagnosis. I nodded slowly. Said it sounded complicated. Asked if she could explain more. She said these windows don't stay open long. Good advisors are selective. Opportunities disappear fast. Urgency wrapped in silk. I told her I'd need to think about it. Maybe talk to my attorney. Her expression flickered. Just for a second. Then she recovered. Said of course. But attorneys sometimes overcomplicate things. Charge unnecessary fees. She touched my hand. Said she only wanted what was best for me. The waitress brought my tea. I sipped it slowly. Watched Vivian over the rim. She asked about my assets. How much equity in the house? Any savings? Retirement accounts? I gave her vague numbers. Said Frank had been careful. That we'd saved over the years. Her pupils dilated slightly. She said she could introduce me to her team. People who'd helped others in similar situations. I asked when. She said soon. After the holidays. When everyone was back in their offices. I thanked her. Said I appreciated her concern. Her friendship. The word friendship tasted like rust. We left separately. She walked to a silver Lexus. I walked to my 12-year-old Honda. The contrast wasn't accidental. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table. Replayed our conversation in my mind. She'd been fishing. Testing how much I knew. How vulnerable I was. And I'd given her exactly what she wanted. Uncertainty. Weakness. Trust. Now I needed to build the trap. I opened my laptop. Created a document. Bank statements that looked real but weren't. Equity calculations. Investment summaries. Retirement account balances. Numbers that suggested I had nearly $2 million in liquid assets. Money Frank never had. Accounts that didn't exist. But money that would look irresistible to someone like Vivian. I formatted everything carefully. Made it look professional. Official. Then I printed copies. Put them in a manila folder. Bait for a predator. My phone rang at 2:15. Daniel. His voice was tight. Anxious. He asked if I'd met with Vivian. What we'd talked about. I told him she'd been helpful. Suggested some financial strategies. Estate planning ideas. Silence on the other end. Then he asked if I was considering selling the house. I said maybe. That it was a lot to maintain. That Vivian's ideas made sense. More silence. He said he wanted to come over. Talk things through. Make sure I understood everything. I told him to come tomorrow. Day after Christmas. When we could talk properly. He agreed. His relief was audible. After we hung up, I sat in Frank's chair. The leather was worn. Cracked in places. He'd sat here every evening. Reading the paper. Doing crosswords. The house remembered him. The creak of floorboards. The smell of his coffee. The shape of his absence. I pulled out my notebook. Started a new page. Timeline. Everything that had happened since Frank's funeral. May Vivian appears at the reception. Offers condolences. Takes my number. June casual texts. Coffee invitations. Gradual integration into our lives. July Daniel mentions money troubles at a family dinner. Vivian overhears. August Vivian offers to help. Says she knows people. Has connections. September Daniel takes out a second mortgage. $70,000. October my house gets appraised. POA document forged. Surveillance photos begin. November Thanksgiving. Daniel mentions a promotion that doesn't exist. December the Mercedes. The red bow. The mason jar. A perfect timeline. Professional. Methodical. This wasn't impulse. This was design. I opened my email. Drafted a message to Margaret. Attached the fake financial statements. Asked her to review them. Said I wanted everything documented before any meetings. She responded in minutes. Said she'd look them over tonight. Call me tomorrow. The sun was setting. Orange light spilled across my kitchen floor. Christmas dinner would have been ready by now. Frank would be carving turkey. Daniel would be telling stories. Brooke would be laughing. The house would be warm. Full. Instead, I heated soup. Ate at the counter. Alone. But not helpless. The mason jar sat on the mantel. $5. 3 buttons. A receipt. I picked it up, held it to the light. Daniel had meant it as tribute, as acknowledgement of my values. But he'd actually given me something more valuable. Clarity. People tell you your worth if you listen. They show you their calculations, their bottom lines. Daniel had shown me his. Now I'd show him what a 69-year-old widow with a library science degree could actually calculate. I opened my phone, scrolled to Aaron Lau's office number. Tomorrow was Saturday, but his voicemail would be there. I'd leave a message, careful, measured, the kind that demands a callback, the kind that changes everything. Outside, Christmas lights blinked. Neighbors' houses glowed warm, safe. My house was dark except for the kitchen. But darkness has its advantages. You can see out. They can't see in. I finished my soup, washed the bowl. Frank's dish towel hung on the oven handle. Green and white checks, worn thin from 40 years of use. I folded it carefully, hung it back. Some things you keep not because they're useful, but because they remember. Tomorrow, Daniel would come over. We'd talk about money, about plans, about my future, and I'd be ready, with documents, with questions, with recordings, a librarian's arsenal. I climbed the stairs. Frank's photo watched from the hallway wall. Taken in 1987. Outside the courthouse. The day we paid off our first car. We looked young, relieved, ridiculous. The frame was simple. The memory was not. I touched the glass, said goodnight the way I had for 43 years. Then I went to bed. Tomorrow would require energy, focus, performance. Tonight, I just needed rest. And the cold comfort of knowing exactly what I was walking into. The recorder sat charging on my nightstand. Ready. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. December 26th arrived gray and cold. Daniel called at 8. Said he'd be over at 10. Needed to talk seriously. I made coffee, laid out the fake financial statements on the kitchen table. Made everything look casual, accidental. The doorbell rang at 9:58. Daniel came alone. Brooke had stayed home. He said she wasn't feeling well. Translation: she couldn't face me. He sat at the table. Saw the papers. His eyes locked on the numbers. I watched his face calculate. 2 million. Liquid. Available. His Adam's apple bobbed when he swallowed. He asked if these were real. If I actually had this much saved. I said Frank had been careful. Very careful. I'd only recently consolidated everything. The lie came out smooth. Practiced. Daniel leaned back, ran his hand through his hair. The gesture was pure Frank. He said Vivian had mentioned investment opportunities. Real estate strategies. Ways to protect assets. Protect. The word they always use before they take. I asked what kind of opportunities. He pulled out a folder. Thick as a textbook. Pages and pages of charts. Projections. Testimonials. Reverse mortgages. Estate liquidation. Asset transfer schedules. Everything designed to move money from my accounts to theirs. He walked through each option. His voice steady, professional, like he'd rehearsed. But his hands shook slightly. The papers trembled. I let him finish. Then I asked one question. Are we in trouble? The room went silent. Daniel's face crumpled. Not like a man. Like a boy caught stealing. He said Brooke lost her job in August. The bills piled up fast. The second mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks. $70,000, plus interest. Vivian had promised help. Said she knew investors. People with real money looking for opportunities. All Daniel had to do was show good faith. Demonstrate family cooperation. The Mercedes had been the first test. Proof of commitment. The next step was my house. My assets. My signature on the right documents. I asked about the power of attorney. The forged one. His face went white. He said he'd never seen it. Never signed anything like that. Vivian must have handled the paperwork. Pawns never see every move on the board. I stood up, walked to the counter. My hands were steady. Poured him coffee. Black. The way Frank used to take it. Then I told him the truth. There was no 2 million. The statements were fake. Bait for a predator. Daniel stared at me like I'd spoken another language. I explained about Vivian's purse. The surveillance photos. Aaron's law practice. The pattern of elder fraud. I told him about the real appraisal. The forged signature. The timeline that started at Frank's funeral. Each fact landed like a stone. Daniel put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. He said he'd been so desperate. So scared of losing everything. Vivian seemed legitimate. Professional. The testimonials looked real. The numbers made sense. Hope had been louder than math. I sat back down. Let him cry. Some things require breaking before they heal. When he finally looked up, I asked what he wanted to do now. He said he didn't know. That everything was already in motion. Vivian expected answers. Commitments. I told him there was a way out. But it required honesty. Documentation. Evidence. His eyes met mine. Red-rimmed. Terrified. I showed him my phone. The voice recorder app. Already tested. Ready. Explained that we'd document everything. Every conversation. Every promise. Every lie. Then we'd hand it all to a prosecutor. Let them read the rest. Daniel asked what would happen to him. To Brooke. I said that depended on what he did next. Victims who cooperate get different treatment than accomplices. The clock ticked on the wall. Frank's old kitchen clock. Battery-powered. Reliable. Daniel nodded slowly. Said he'd help. Whatever it took. I handed him paper. A pen. Told him to write down everything. Every meeting. Every promise. Every document Vivian had given him. He wrote for 20 minutes. His handwriting was terrible. Always had been. But the details were clear. Dates. Names. Amounts. Locations. A timeline that matched mine perfectly. When he finished, I made copies. One for Margaret. One for me. One for Aaron. Daniel asked about Aaron. Why he mattered. I explained about Vivian's son. The elder fraud attorney who didn't know his mother was the predator he fought against. The irony wasn't lost on Daniel. His laugh came out bitter. Broken. I told him Brooke needed to be part of this too. That fear makes people complicit. But cooperation makes them witnesses. He said he'd bring her tomorrow. That she'd been scared to tell the truth. Scared of Vivian. Scared of losing everything. Fear is a weapon. Vivian had used it perfectly. But fear also breaks. Especially when you shine light on it. Daniel left at noon. His car looked even more beaten than before. Rust. Dents. Reality. I called Margaret. Told her Daniel had cooperated. That we needed a meeting soon. She said she'd set something up for tomorrow afternoon. Her office. Private. Safe. Then I called Aaron's office. Left another message. More urgent this time. Said I had information about his mother. That it was time sensitive. That lives were at stake. My voice stayed calm. Measured. The kind that demands attention. The afternoon stretched long. I made soup. Did laundry. Normal tasks that felt surreal. Frank's sweater came out of the dryer. Still smelled like him somehow. Wool and Old Spice. I folded it carefully. Put it back in his drawer. Some things you keep not because you need them, but because letting go feels like erasure. The mason jar sat on the mantel. A monument to miscalculation. I picked it up, shook it gently. The $5 rattled against the buttons. Daniel had meant it as love. Misguided, desperate, but love nonetheless. That's what made this hurt. Not the betrayal, but the brokenness that led to it. My phone buzzed at 4:30. Aaron Lau, returning my call. His voice was careful, controlled, professional. He asked what information I had about his mother. I told him I was a widow in Virginia. That his mother had been staying with friends nearby. That some concerning documents had surfaced. Documents with my name, my property, my forged signature. Silence on the other end. Long, heavy. Then he asked if I could email him copies. Anything I had. I said I could. But first, I needed to know he'd keep this confidential until we understood the full scope. He agreed. Gave me his personal email. Not the office one. I sent everything. Photos from Vivian's phone. The forged POA. The appraisal. The timeline. 10 minutes later, he called back. His voice was different. Strained. Like someone recognizing a nightmare they'd been living inside. He said he'd fly out tomorrow. We'd meet. Go through everything together. He asked if his mother knew I'd contacted him. I said no. That she thought I was a confused old woman. Easy prey. Aaron's laugh was sharp. Painful. He said he'd been calling his mother for weeks. She kept saying everything was fine. That she was enjoying time with friends. Friends she was actively defrauding. The cognitive dissonance was audible in his voice. We agreed to meet Friday morning. December 28th. Margaret's office. Neutral ground. Legal protection. Witnesses. After we hung up, I sat in Frank's chair. The leather creaked familiar. Outside, the sun was setting. Orange light spilled through bare trees. The neighborhood looked peaceful, normal, like nothing was wrong. But inside these houses, behind these walls, people were drowning. Desperate. Making terrible choices. I thought about Daniel. About the second mortgage. The Mercedes. The lie that had grown bigger than truth. Desperation makes good people believe in shortcuts. I'd seen it at the library. Patrons who couldn't pay fines. Who stole books. Who lied about lost items. Not because they were bad, but because they were breaking. The system was designed for that. To catch people when they fell. Then charge them for landing. Vivian had just refined the system. Made it personal. Profitable. But she'd made one mistake. She'd underestimated a librarian. We're trained to notice patterns. To catalog discrepancies. To preserve evidence. And we never, ever forget to check our sources. I stood up. Turned on the porch light. Not as a welcome. As a marker. Tomorrow, Daniel would bring Brooke. They'd tell Margaret everything. Friday, Aaron would arrive. We'd build the case together. And soon, very soon, Vivian would realize her mistake. The predator had been catalogued. Filed. Cross-referenced. Now came the reckoning. I made dinner. Frank's chili recipe. The one his mother taught him in 1979. Ate slowly. Tasted every bite. Some nights require comfort. Even when comfort is just memory and ground beef. The house settled around me. Familiar creaks. Known shadows. Frank's absence was a presence now. Constant. Heavy. But no longer crushing. I'd learned to carry it. Tomorrow would bring more breaking. More truth. more pain, but also more clarity. And clarity, I'd learned, was the only real power anyone ever had. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. December 27th. Thursday morning. Rain drummed against the kitchen window. The kind that soaks through coats. Through resolve. Daniel and Brooke arrived at 9. Both looked like they hadn't slept. Brooke's eyes were swollen. Her mascara from yesterday still smudged beneath her lashes. She apologized before her coat was even off. Said she'd been scared. Complicit. Wrong. I made coffee. Let her talk. She explained how it started. The job loss in August. Severance that lasted 3 weeks. Bills that didn't stop. Mortgage. Car payments. Credit cards maxing out one by one. Daniel's salary barely covered half. The panic set in fast. Suffocating. Then Vivian appeared. At a grocery store. Pure coincidence, she'd said. Except there are no coincidences with predators. Only carefully staged accidents. Brooke said Vivian was so polished. So confident. Talked about investment strategies like breathing. She mentioned knowing people. Real people with real money. People who helped families in transition. The word transition made drowning sound like career development. Vivian suggested small steps first. Building trust. Demonstrating commitment to the relationship. The Mercedes had been step 1. A gesture of good faith toward Mom Viv. Proof that Daniel valued family. That he could follow through on big decisions. Brooke's voice cracked when she said it. The word decisions hung like indictment. I asked what step 2 was supposed to be. Daniel answered, my house. Sold to Vivian's investment group. Then leased back to me. They'd get a finder's fee. $20,000. Enough to cover 2 mortgage payments. And I'd get to stay in my home. With professional management. Simplified finances. Everyone wins. Except the person being harvested. I asked if they'd ever met the investment group. Brooke shook her head. Said they were supposed to meet them next week. After New Year's. After I'd signed preliminary documents. After the trap had closed. I showed them the forged power of attorney. The signature that wasn't mine. Brooke went pale. Said she'd never seen that document. Daniel neither. Vivian had handled all the paperwork. Said it was standard. Pre-approval processing. The lies were layered like wallpaper. Pretty on the surface. Poison underneath. I told them about my conversation with Aaron. That he was flying in tomorrow. That his mother had built a career out of cases exactly like this. The irony landed heavy. Daniel actually laughed. Sharp. Bitter. Broken. We spent an hour building the timeline. Every interaction. Every promise. Every red flag they'd ignored. Brooke cried through most of it. Not performance crying. The kind that comes from recognizing yourself in a mirror you've been avoiding. She said she'd known something was wrong. Deep down. But hope was louder than instinct. And fear was loudest of all. I understood. Fear makes people do impossible math. Believe impossible promises. Fear says shortcuts exist. That good things happen to desperate people. That strangers become saviors. Fear is a liar. But a convincing one. We drove to Margaret's office at 11. Rain turned the roads slick. Gray. Margaret's building smelled like coffee and old carpet. Familiar. Safe. Her conference room had a long table. Windows facing the street. A box of tissues on the credenza. She'd prepared for tears. Daniel and Brooke sat across from us. Margaret recorded everything. Audio and notes. They walked through it again. Every detail. Every meeting, every document. Margaret asked hard questions. Direct, legal, unflinching. Had they signed anything giving Vivian authority? No. Had they received any money yet? No. Had they known about the forged POA? No. Had they suspected fraud? Eventually. Too late. Margaret made notes, organized everything into folders, color-coded, cross-referenced. A librarian would have been proud. She explained the legal landscape, what they'd be facing, what protection cooperation might offer. Then she called the county prosecutor's office. Put it on speaker. A woman answered. Assistant prosecutor. Elder Fraud Division. Margaret explained the situation. Forgery. Surveillance. Attempted financial exploitation. The prosecutor asked questions. Calm. Methodical. Taking notes of her own. She said they'd want to meet. Review documents. Build a timeline. But first, they needed more evidence. Documentation of intent. Recorded conversations. Proof that Vivian knew exactly what she was doing. I said I could get that. That Vivian trusted me. Thought I was confused. Malleable. The prosecutor asked if I was comfortable wearing a wire. Meeting with Vivian again. I said yes without hesitation. Brooke's eyes went wide. Said it was dangerous. That Vivian would know. Would suspect something. I told her predators expect sheep. Not librarians with recorders. Margaret scheduled a meeting with the prosecutor for Monday, January 2nd. We'd have the weekend to gather final evidence. Prepare statements. Build the case. After they left, Margaret and I sat alone in her conference room. Rain continued outside. Steady. Relentless. She asked if I was really okay with this. With confronting Vivian directly. I told her I'd spent 40 years managing difficult patrons. Explaining overdue fees. Confronting book thieves. This was just another circulation problem. More expensive. More personal. But fundamentally the same. Someone taking what wasn't theirs. Someone needing to return it. Margaret smiled. The sad kind that acknowledges damage while appreciating survival. She said she'd have papers ready for Monday. Witness statements. Evidence logs. Timeline documentation. Everything the prosecutor would need to move forward. I drove home through rain and traffic. The roads were crowded with post-Christmas returns. People exchanging gifts that didn't fit. Didn't match. Didn't deliver what was promised. My house was dark when I arrived. Cold. I turned on lights. Made tea. Sat at the kitchen table. The fake financial statements were still there. $2 million that didn't exist. But Vivian didn't know that. And greed had a way of opening mouths. Especially when the prize looked this big. I texted her from my phone. Said I'd been thinking about our conversation. About the investment opportunity. Asked if we could meet again. Soon. Somewhere private. Her response came within minutes. Said she'd love to. That her team was very interested. She suggested her house. Tomorrow afternoon. 2 o'clock. Perfect timing. The day before Aaron arrived. I confirmed. Said I'd bring my financial documents. That I wanted to understand everything clearly. She replied with a heart emoji. Said she was so proud of me for taking control of my future. The emoji looked obscene on my screen. Like seeing a wolf blow a kiss. I made dinner. Leftover chili. Toast. Ate at the table where Frank and I had shared 43 years of meals. The chair across from me stayed empty. But his presence felt closer tonight. Like he was watching, waiting to see how this played out. I thought about the mason jar. The $5. The receipt from 1987. Daniel had been trying to honor me. In his broken, desperate way. But honor isn't about sentiment. It's about action. Real honor would have been asking for help. Admitting struggle. Choosing honesty over shortcuts. Real honor would have been saying no to a stranger offering solutions that sounded too good. But desperation strips honor down to survival. And survival stops asking questions. I understood that now. Not forgiveness yet. But understanding. The path between the two was long. Muddy. Uncertain. But at least we were walking it. Together. Toward something real. I cleaned the kitchen. Washed dishes. Dried them with Frank's old towel. Green and white checks. Worn nearly transparent in places. Tomorrow I'd walk into Vivian's house. Carry my recorder. Perform confusion and trust. And I'd document every single word. The rain stopped around 10. Clouds cleared. Stars appeared cold and distant. I stood on the porch. Breathed winter air. Sharp. Clean. Somewhere across town, Vivian was probably planning her presentation. Perfecting her performance. Counting money that wasn't hers yet. But would be soon. Except it wouldn't. Because the confused old widow had spent 40 years organizing information. Catching discrepancies. Following trails. And tomorrow, that training would pay off. I went inside. Locked the doors. Set the alarm. Frank's photo watched from the hallway. Young. Hopeful. Innocent. We'd had no idea what life would bring. The losses. The grief. The betrayals. But also the strength. The clarity. The sharp edges that come from survival. I climbed the stairs. Got ready for bed. Set 3 alarms. Laid out tomorrow's clothes. Tested the recorder one more time. Clear audio. Long battery life. Hidden in my purse. Everything ready. Some people think getting older means getting weaker. Softer. Easier to break. They forget we've been practicing survival for decades. That we've buried people we loved. Rebuilt lives from scratch. Learned to carry grief like groceries. Heavy. Awkward. But manageable. Tomorrow, Vivian would learn what a 69-year-old widow was actually made of. Not softness. Steel. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. December 28th. Friday afternoon. The sky hung low and gray. Winter pressed against the windows. I dressed carefully. Navy cardigan. Pearl buttons. Frank's wedding ring on my right hand. My purse held the essentials. The fake financial statements. My phone. The recorder already running. Vivian's house sat in a newer development. Brick facade. Manicured lawn. The kind of place that screamed success. The driveway was empty except for the silver Lexus. No other cars. No team waiting inside. I parked on the street. Checked my reflection one last time. Looked like somebody's grandmother. Harmless. Trusting. Perfect. The doorbell chimed something classical. Vivaldi maybe. Or Handel. Vivian answered in cream cashmere. Pearls. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her home smelled expensive. Vanilla candles. Fresh flowers. Money. The living room had been staged like a boutique office. Glossy brochures on the coffee table. Charts on easels. Fresh pastries arranged on china. 2 chairs faced the presentation area. Expensive looking. Uncomfortable once you sat. Vivian gestured for me to sit. Asked if I wanted coffee. Tea. Water. I chose tea. Needed my hands occupied. Needed her distracted. She disappeared into the kitchen. I scanned the room quickly. Efficiently. More charts. Printed testimonials. Photos of happy seniors in beautiful homes. All props. All theater. She returned with tea in delicate cups. Bone china, gold trim, sat across from me, smoothed her skirt. Her smile was warm, practiced, lethal. She said her team was caught in an emergency. A client crisis in Richmond. Very unfortunate timing, but she could walk me through everything. Answer any questions. Get things started. The lie came out smooth. Well rehearsed. I nodded, said I understood, pulled out my fake financial statements. Her eyes locked on the numbers. Pupils dilated. The reaction was involuntary, primal. $2 million. Right there on paper. She set down her tea, leaned forward, asked if she could look more closely. I handed them over, watched her flip through pages. Her fingers trembled slightly. Greed does that. Makes the hands shake, the breath quicken. She said this was wonderful. That I'd been so responsible. That Frank had clearly planned well. Then she pivoted, said traditional investments were too conservative, too slow, that someone my age needed aggressive strategies. International vehicles, favorable tax treaties. I asked if international meant offshore. She said yes, but completely legal, when structured properly. The word properly carried so much weight, so much implication. I asked about her background, her experience with these strategies. She waved her hand, said she had relationships, connections, access to opportunities most people never see. Relationships, not credentials, not licenses, not oversight, just relationships. I asked about her team, when I could meet them. She said soon, after the holidays. Once preliminary documents were signed. Always the documents first, the signatures, the transfer of control. Then the team would appear. Or wouldn't, depending on how trapped I was. I mentioned Erin, said I'd heard she had a son in Boston. Her face flickered, just for a second. Surprise, irritation, calculation, then recovery. She said Erin was complicated, that he didn't understand her work, that he'd always been judgmental, controlling, trying to manage her life. The words came fast, defensive, like a script she'd practiced too many times. She said sometimes family doesn't support your success, your independence, your right to live freely. The irony was staggering. She was describing exactly what she did to others. Projection wrapped in cashmere and pearls. I said I understood, that Daniel sometimes worried too much about me. Her smile returned, said that's why this opportunity was perfect. It would give me independence, security, freedom. The sales pitch continued. Offshore accounts, asset protection, estate optimization. Words that sounded sophisticated, that meant nothing, that hid theft behind jargon. She pulled out more charts, showed me projections, returns that defied mathematics, said my $2 million could become $3 million within 18 months. Tax-free, guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed except death and taxes. Frank used to say that. Vivian was promising exemption from both. I asked about the first steps. What I'd need to do. She said we'd start with the house, transferring title to the investment trust. Then I'd lease it back. Same home, different paperwork, complete protection. And Daniel would receive his finder's fee. $20,000 for facilitating the relationship. Payment for selling his mother. I asked when this would happen. She said next week, Tuesday, after the new year. Fresh start, new beginning. Her urgency was showing, the pressure, the timeline. Predators need to close fast, before prey starts thinking, questioning, escaping. I widened my eyes, Said it seemed fast. That maybe I should talk to my attorney. Vivian's expression tightened. Said attorneys overcomplicate things. Charge unnecessary fees. Slow down opportunities. That these windows close quickly. That her partners were selective. That hesitation costs money. The pressure tactics were textbook. Create urgency. Eliminate oversight. Isolate the victim. I nodded slowly. Said I just wanted to understand everything clearly. She touched my hand. Her skin was cold, smooth, like marble. Said she only wanted what was best for me. That she cared about my future. The word cared tasted like poison. I pulled back my hand. Slowly, naturally. Reached for my purse. Said I needed to think about it. Process everything. Maybe sleep on it. Her smile froze. Eyes hardened just slightly. She said of course, but asked me to leave the financial statements so her team could review them. I hesitated. Perfect timing. Perfect performance. Then agreed. Said I had copies at home. She took them like treasure. Folded them carefully. Set them on the table. I stood to leave. She walked me to the door. Said she'd call tomorrow. That we'd finalize everything Tuesday. That this was the right decision. The right decision for her bank account anyway. I drove 3 blocks. Pulled over. Stopped the recording. My hands were shaking now. Not fear. Adrenaline. Release. Every word documented. Every promise. Every lie. I texted Margaret. Said I had everything. That the recording was clear. She responded immediately. Said she'd listen tonight. Prepare for Monday's meeting. Then I texted Aaron. Said his mother had just tried to defraud me of $2 million. That I had recordings. Evidence. Timeline. That we'd meet tomorrow morning. His hotel. 9 o'clock. His response took longer. When it came, it was just 2 words. Thank you. I drove home through late afternoon traffic. The sun was setting behind clouds. Gray turning to black. My kitchen felt warm after the cold of Vivian's staged office. I made soup. Real food. Nothing fancy. Just warmth and salt and sustenance. Sat at the table. Replayed the recording. Took notes. Marked timestamps. Every admission. Every pressure tactic. Every lie about the Phantom team. 42 minutes of evidence. Clear. Damning. Irrefutable. The doorbell rang at 7. Daniel and Brooke. Anxious. Pale. Vivian had called them. Said the meeting went wonderfully. That I was ready to move forward. That Tuesday would change everything. I played them the recording. Watched their faces as they heard it. The promises. The urgency. The manipulation. Brooke cried. Again. Or still. Hard to tell anymore. Daniel just sat. Silent. Listening to the architect of their destruction. When it finished, he asked what happened now. I told them about Monday. The prosecutor. The evidence package. That Aaron was flying in tomorrow. That the case was building. That their cooperation had mattered. Would continue to matter. Brooke asked if they'd go to jail. I said that wasn't my decision. But that victims who helped catch predators usually fared better. They left an hour later. Exhausted. Terrified. But no longer alone in it. The house settled into evening quiet. Familiar creaks. Known shadows. I sat in Frank's chair. Held his coffee mug. The chipped one from 2003. Tomorrow I'd meet Aaron. The son trying to save seniors while his mother hunted them. The cognitive dissonance must be destroying him. But also clarifying. Painful clarity that forces choice. Love someone or excuse them. Different projects. Different outcomes. I'd learned that with Daniel. Was still learning it. The mason jar caught lamplight. $5 glinted inside. Not an insult anymore. Not a treasure either. Just evidence of where we'd been, what we'd survived. Tomorrow would bring more truth, more breaking, more rebuilding. But tonight, I just sat in Frank's chair, in our house, holding the pieces of a family that was learning to be honest. Finally, the recorder sat charging on the counter, ready for whatever came next. And I sat ready too. Not soft, not confused, not prey. Just a 69-year-old widow who'd spent 40 years cataloging information. And who'd just documented a perfect case. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. December 29th, Saturday morning. Aaron's hotel was downtown, near the courthouse. Clean lines, business class functionality. I arrived at 8:50. Early, always early. The lobby smelled like coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. Muzak played something forgettable. Aaron appeared at 8:58. Tall, lean, wearing yesterday's travel clothes. His eyes were red, exhausted, haunted. We shook hands. His grip was firm, professional, but his hand trembled slightly. The hotel restaurant was nearly empty. Saturday morning. Most people sleeping late. We chose a corner booth. Away from windows, from servers, from casual observation. He ordered coffee. Black. I ordered tea. Neither of us touched the menus. He asked me to start from the beginning. When I first met his mother. I walked him through it. Frank's funeral. Vivian's appearance. The 8-month cultivation. The Christmas Mercedes. The mason jar. The purse left behind. His jaw tightened when I mentioned the surveillance photos. The forged documents. I showed him everything on my laptop. Photos. Timelines. Bank records. The forged power of attorney with my wrong signature. He stared at it for a long time. His mother's handwriting in the margins. Then he pulled out his own folder. Thick. Organized. Years of documentation. His mother's travel records. Credit card statements. Property transfers in 4 different states. Names of other victims. Elderly. Widowed. Isolated. A pattern spanning 7 years. Maybe longer. He said he'd suspected something 2 years ago. Small inconsistencies. Vague explanations. But she was his mother. And children want to believe their parents. Even when evidence suggests otherwise. He'd started investigating quietly 6 months ago. Hired a private investigator. Found 3 other families. Similar patterns. Similar losses. But no criminal charges. Victims too embarrassed. Too confused. Too dead. His voice cracked on the last word. I asked why he hadn't confronted her. He said he had. Last summer. She denied everything. Said he was being cruel. That he'd always been judgmental. Never supported her independence. The same script she'd used on me yesterday. He'd planned to fly out for Christmas. Force a real conversation. Get answers. She'd insisted he stay in Boston. That she was with friends. Having a lovely time. Friends she was systematically defrauding. The coffee sat untouched between us. Growing cold. He asked to hear the recording from yesterday. The meeting at her house. I played it. All 42 minutes. Watched his face as he heard his mother work. The charm. The pressure. The lies. When it finished, he sat silent. Staring at nothing. Then he asked what I wanted to do. I told him about Monday. The prosecutor. Margaret's office. The evidence package. That Daniel and Brooke were cooperating. That the case was solid. He asked what would happen to his mother. I said that depended on many things. her cooperation, restitution, prior victims. That elder fraud carried serious charges. Federal attention. Prison time. He nodded slowly, like someone accepting surgery. Necessary. Painful. Inevitable. Then he said something I hadn't expected. He wanted to testify against her if needed, for accountability. That loving someone and excusing them were different projects. That he'd spent his career protecting seniors from predators. And his mother had become exactly what he fought. The words hung heavy. Final. We finished cold coffee, made plans for Monday, coordinated with Margaret. Aaron would bring his files, his investigator's report, evidence of the pattern. The prosecutor would have everything needed. Timeline, victims, documentation, a case that couldn't be dismissed, couldn't be explained away. He walked me to my car. The morning was cold, gray, appropriate. He thanked me, said most victims never fight back, never document, never survive it intact. I told him I'd had 40 years of practice. At libraries, organizing chaos, catching discrepancies, that predators relied on shame, silence, isolation. But librarians don't do silence. We do records. He smiled, sad, broken, but genuine, said his mother had made a crucial mistake. She'd targeted someone who kept receipts. We shook hands again. His grip steadier now, purposeful. He'd call his mother tonight. Tell her he was in town. Wanted to meet, but not before Monday, not before the prosecutor had everything. Some conversations require legal protection. Witnesses, documentation. I drove home through Saturday traffic. People running errands, living normal lives. The contrast felt surreal. Like existing in two different worlds simultaneously. My phone rang at noon. Margaret. She'd reviewed everything. The recordings, Aaron's files, the timeline. Said the case was airtight. The prosecutor would move forward. Charges were inevitable. Monday would be busy. Statements, evidence review, coordination with Aaron. And likely by Tuesday, Vivian would know. The game would end. The reckoning would begin. I made lunch. Grilled cheese. Frank's recipe. Extra butter. Cast iron skillet. Ate slowly. Tasted every bite. Simple food after complicated mornings. Daniel called at 2. Asked if I'd met with Aaron. How it went. I told him Aaron was bringing 7 years of evidence. 3 other families. That the pattern was clear. Professional. Rehearsed. That we weren't the first. Just the first to fight back successfully. Silence on the phone. Heavy. Processed. Then Daniel asked if Aaron hated his mother. I said no. That hate was simpler. Easier. That Aaron was grieving someone still alive. Someone who'd become unrecognizable. That sometimes love requires boundaries. Legal ones. Daniel understood. Or was beginning to. The afternoon stretched long. I did laundry. Changed sheets. Normal weekend tasks. But nothing felt normal. Everything felt like waiting. For Monday. For consequences. For the moment the trap finally closed. My phone buzzed at 5. Unknown number. Vivian. Her voice was warm, excited, predatory. She said she'd reviewed my financials with her partners. Everyone was thrilled. That Tuesday would be perfect. Her attorney would prepare documents. Everything streamlined. She asked if I was still comfortable moving forward. I said yes. That I trusted her guidance. Her expertise. The lie tasted like metal. But necessary. She said she'd text me the address. Her attorney's office. 10 in the morning. That I should bring identification. Social Security card. Banking information. Everything needed to transfer my life into her control. I agreed. Said I'd be there. Said I was grateful for her help. The gratitude nearly choked me. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table. Hands shaking now. Not fear. Not anymore. Just adrenaline. And anger. She thought Tuesday would be payday. Her biggest score yet. $2 million from a confused widow. Easy. Clean. Routine. Instead, Tuesday would bring prosecutors. Evidence. Aaron's testimony. The predator becoming prey. I texted Margaret the attorney's address. She'd forward it to the prosecutor. They'd be ready. Waiting. Coordinating. Tuesday wouldn't be a closing. It would be an arrest. The evening news played in the background. Stories about holiday returns, traffic accidents, weather. Normal people living normal lives. Unaware of the dramas playing out in corner booths. In hotel lobbies. In staged living rooms with fake financial statements. Frank's photo watched from the mantel. Young. Hopeful. He'd have been proud of this. The documentation. The planning. The refusal to be prey. Or maybe horrified. That it was necessary. That our son had been involved. That the world had gotten this complicated. This dangerous. This broken. Both probably. Pride and horror aren't mutually exclusive. I made dinner. Soup again. Comfort in repetition. Ate alone at the table. Our table. Tomorrow was Sunday. Day of rest. Last quiet day before everything changed. I'd go to church maybe. Or stay home. Read. Prepare. Monday would require energy. Focus. Endurance. The marathon of statements. Questions. Legal procedures. But also closure. Justice. The beginning of repair. I washed dishes. Dried them with Frank's towel. Folded it carefully. The mason jar sat on the mantel. $5. 3 buttons. A receipt. Soon I'd put it away. In a box. In the attic. With other artifacts from difficult seasons. Not thrown away. Just archived. Evidence of survival. Of the distance between then and eventually. I turned off the downstairs lights. Climbed the stairs. Set out Monday's clothes. Professional. Serious. Appropriate for testimony. The recorder sat fully charged. Ready for whatever came next. Though Monday wouldn't require recording. Just truth. Plain. Documented. Irrefutable. I got into bed. Frank's side still empty. Still cold. But less lonely somehow. Less crushing. Grief was changing. Becoming familiar. A companion rather than ambush. Outside, the neighborhood was dark. Quiet. Peaceful. Inside, I was ready. For Monday's reckoning. For Tuesday's revelation. For the moment Vivian realized she'd been catalogued. Filed. Cross-referenced. And that librarians never forget to close the book properly. With all the pages numbered. All the sources cited. All the endings documented. Sleep came slowly. But when it came, it was deep. Dreamless. The sleep of someone who'd done everything right. And who'd see it through to the end. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. January 2nd. Monday morning. The prosecutor's office smelled like burnt coffee and government efficiency. Gray walls. Fluorescent lights. Chairs that had seen decades of difficult conversations. Margaret arrived first. Briefcase heavy with organized evidence. Face calm. Professional. Daniel and Brooke came 10 minutes later. Both pale. Both terrified. Aaron arrived last. Carrying 2 boxes. 7 years of documentation. 3 other families. The weight of it showed in his shoulders. Assistant Prosecutor Linda Chen met us in the conference room. Sharp. Direct. No nonsense. She'd reviewed everything over the weekend. The timeline. The recordings. The forged documents. Said the case was strong. Charges would include forgery, attempted theft, elder exploitation. Federal charges possible if the pattern crossed state lines. Which it did. We spent 3 hours walking through everything. Statement by statement. Document by document. Linda recorded it all. Audio, video, sworn testimony. Daniel explained how Vivian had cultivated them, found their vulnerability, exploited their desperation. Brooke detailed the promises, the pressure tactics, the manufactured urgency. Aaron presented evidence of other victims. An 82-year-old widower in Maryland lost his home. A 74-year-old woman in Delaware lost her savings, died 6 months later. A couple in North Carolina, their children still fighting to recover assets. The pattern was identical. Befriend, isolate, pressure, extract. Linda took notes, asked clarifying questions, built the framework for charges. Then she explained what would happen next. Tomorrow, Vivian expected to close the deal. At her attorney's office, 10 in the morning. Except the attorney didn't exist. The address was a virtual office, rented by the hour. Vivian would arrive expecting a signing. Instead, she'd find detectives, warrants, evidence. Linda asked if I was willing to wear a wire. Be there when it happened. Get final statements on record. Seal the case completely. I said yes without hesitation. Aaron's face was unreadable, grief and resolve fighting for space. He asked if he should be there when his mother was arrested. Linda said no. That family complicated these situations, made them harder. That his testimony was enough. His evidence crucial, his presence unnecessary. He nodded, relief and disappointment mixing together. We finished at 2. Exhausted, wrung out, ready. Margaret drove me home. Neither of us spoke much. What was there to say? Tomorrow would bring endings, and beginnings, and the messy space between. Back home, the house felt different. Lighter somehow, like pressure lifting. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, looked at Frank's photo. Tomorrow I'd walk into a trap of my own making. Wearing a wire, documenting justice. He'd have been terrified for me. And proud. Both things true simultaneously. Daniel called at 4, asked if I was okay. If I was scared. I told him fear was beside the point. That some things required doing regardless. That running the circulation desk had taught me that. Face the problem. Document it. Resolve it. Overdue books or elder fraud. The principle was the same. He said he loved me. First time in months he'd said it and meant it. I said I loved him too. Also true. Also complicated. Love doesn't erase damage, but it survives it, when both sides choose repair. Evening came quiet. I made dinner. Frank's meatloaf. Comfort food for uncomfortable times. Ate slowly. Watched the sun set through bare trees. Tomorrow was the last day of the con. The final performance. Except this time, the audience knew the trick. And had cameras rolling. I laid out tomorrow's clothes. Navy dress. Pearl earrings. Frank's ring. Looking the part mattered. Confused widow. Trusting victim. Perfect prey. The wire would be invisible. The recording crystal clear. The trap perfect. My phone buzzed at 8. Vivian. Her text was warm. Excited. Counted her chickens before they hatched. Said she couldn't wait for tomorrow. That this was the beginning of my new life. my financial freedom, my secure future. The words made my stomach turn. I replied that I was grateful, that I trusted her completely. The lies were necessary, tactical, almost over. She sent back a heart emoji. Like we were friends, like she cared, like she wasn't planning to steal everything I had. I turned off my phone. Didn't want more messages, more performance. Tomorrow would require enough acting. Tonight I just wanted silence. I sat in Frank's chair, held his coffee mug, the familiar weight, thought about the journey from Christmas to now. 2 weeks that felt like years. The Mercedes with its red bow. The mason jar with $5. The moment I'd opened Vivian's purse and found the truth. Everything had hinged on that. The surveillance photos, the forged documents, evidence left behind by accident or arrogance. Didn't matter which. A librarian had found it, catalogued it, built the case. And tomorrow, the case would close. I went upstairs early, set 3 alarms, wanted no possibility of oversleeping. Tomorrow required punctuality, precision, perfect execution. The recorder sat charging. The wire would be fitted tomorrow morning. At the station, Linda would brief me, review signals, establish safety protocols. Then I'd drive to the fake attorney's office, walk in alone, play my part, and document everything until the detectives arrived. Sleep didn't come easy. Adrenaline and anticipation fought exhaustion. But eventually, the house settled. The familiar creaks, the known shadows, and I drifted off, not peacefully, but completely. Tomorrow would be hard, confrontational, final, but also necessary. Just right. The alarm woke me at 6. Still dark outside. Winter morning. I made coffee. Frank's percolator. The sound was steadying. Familiar. Dressed carefully. Checked my reflection. Looked exactly right. Grandmother. Widow. Victim. Perfect camouflage for a woman who'd spent 2 weeks building a prosecutor's case. Margaret picked me up at 7:30. We drove to the police station together. Linda met us in a private room. Showed me the wire. Thin, invisible under clothing. A technician fitted it carefully. Tested the signal. Clear, strong, reliable. Linda reviewed the plan. I'd arrive at 9:50. Vivian expected 10. Let her talk. Let her present documents. Let her reveal intent. The detectives would arrive at 10:15. Warrants ready. Backup in place. I'd be safe. Protected. Never alone. I asked what would happen to Vivian. Linda said that depended on many things. Cooperation. Restitution. Prior record. But realistically, prison. Years of it. Federal charges were serious. I nodded. Felt nothing. No satisfaction. No revenge. Just inevitability. Actions have consequences. The library had taught me that too. We left at 9:30. Margaret drove. I sat quiet. Focused. The address was in a business park. Generic office building. Suites for rent. Suite 340 was empty except for a folding table. 2 chairs. A briefcase. Vivian's stage. Her final performance space. Margaret parked across the street. She'd wait. Watch. Be ready if needed. I walked to the building alone. Heels clicking on pavement. Heart steady. The elevator hummed upward. 3rd floor. Down the hall. Suite 340. The door was unlocked. I walked in. Vivian stood by the window. Cashmere. Pearls. Predator in designer clothing. She turned when I entered. Smiled wide. Warm. Completely false. Said she was so proud of me. So excited for this moment. That today my life would change. My future secured. My family protected. The lies flowed smooth. Practiced. Professional. She gestured to the table. Said her attorney was running late. Traffic. Apologies. But we could review documents. Get familiar with everything. She pulled out papers. Transfer agreements. Trust documents. Banking authorizations. Everything designed to move my assets into her control. I sat down. Looked through pages. Asked careful questions. Let her explain. Let her sell. Let her incriminate. The wire captured everything. Every word. Every promise. Every lie. She said once I signed, the wire transfer would happen immediately. $2 million into the investment trust. Then back to me. Cleaner. Protected. Optimized. Except it wouldn't come back. It would vanish. Offshore. Untraceable. Gone. I asked about Daniel's finder's fee. When he'd receive it. She said within days. 20,000. As promised. Payment for delivering his mother. I picked up the pen. Held it over the signature line. Vivian's eyes gleamed. Victory. Payday. Success. Then I set the pen down. Said I wanted to call my attorney first. Just to confirm. Her expression froze. Smile locked. Eyes calculating. She said that wasn't necessary. That we'd discussed this. That delays cost money. I said I'd feel better. Just a quick call. She stood up. Walked to the window. Her phone appeared in her hand. Before she could dial, the door opened. 2 detectives. Badges. Warrants. Authority. Linda Chen followed them in. Calm. Professional. Inevitable. Said Vivian Lau was under arrest. Elder exploitation. Fraud. Forgery. Read her rights while Vivian's face drained white. The expensive room became very small. Very real. Very final. Vivian asked what this was. Some kind of mistake. Linda said no mistake. Just evidence. Testimony. Justice. The red bow felt a world away.